What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Hart. For those of you that are new, happy Wednesday. And today I'll be breaking down this 4-game slate here for Thursday night on DraftKings. Kind of doing an early look slate breakdown where I talk through who I like, who I don't like, kind of throw some early look plays into my player pool of who I want to build around. Obviously, we do have to wait for injury news, which changes the whole slate. So I wouldn't suggest, starting your lineups, building them out until about 15 minutes before the slate starts. And then you can start building them out once we get the injury news. And then obviously, if you want to utilize late swap, which I suggest you should, that's a smart way to go about DFS, especially if there's some studs like this Philly situation with Maxi, obviously Embiid's out. A lot that you can late swap with to kind of gain an edge in terms of the field. So let's jump right into it. If you guys watched my video for tonight's breakdown, the Bulls off to a good start there. Same with Charlotte, with Brandon Miller, with PJ Washington, but Io, Vooch, and Kobe White all doing really, really well. So hopefully you guys, tuned into that. But hopping into this 4-game slate here, let's take a quick look at the odds. Obviously, it's very early. I'm recording this. I think the first 4 or 5 games have started. So I think there's like 3 more that had to start for tonight. Midway through the night right now, recording this pretty early on. But tomorrow we have the Lakers versus Celtics. Should be an interesting game to watch. Right now it's a 10.5 point spread, 240 game total. So a lot of blowout risk there. But obviously a good game environment in terms of the total points. Pacers Knicks, 3-point spread, 241 total. Sixers Jazz, 4-point spread, 233.5 total. And we're missing the Memphis and the Cavs game. So hopping over here to this first game here, Lakers versus Boston. Right now the big news is LeBron and AD. And that's why it's pretty much a 10.5 point spread because they're both questionable here for this game. So it'll be interesting to see if they do play. I don't know. They're kind of going through a tough time here, both of them, in terms of them playing, them being injured, their team just doing bad. As you can see, LeBron played their last game. AD did not. I would assume AD is back. Probably LeBron as well. I mean, a primetime matchup here versus Boston, but according to the spread right now, it seems like, Vegas thinks that they probably won't, or they just think that the Lakers are bad, which they are. So right now, I'm not really sure, but if, both of them are out, obviously, we're going to want to get to, I'd say, at least one Lakers player because, if the game does stay close somehow going against Boston, one of these guys or a few of these guys are going to have good games. But D'Lo, Reeves are going to be your 2 main guys you want to target if there is no LeBron or AD, or if there's one of them, it doesn't matter who it is. You probably want to target that stud. If it's LeBron, there's no AD. You want to go with LeBron. And then I'd say at least one of Russell and Reeves. And obviously, if it's Anthony Davis, the same situation. Because Russell and Reeves are going to run the offense behind or with LeBron or AD, whoever is in, whoever is out. And so that's kind of situation there. In terms of the value, the best value you could get to would probably be Rui, maybe Christian Wood, just because they're both decent offensively. Like Rui can do a little bit. We've seen games, as you can see here, where he's solid in the minutes he's been getting. He's aggressive offensively, so he's probably your best option in terms of value. I don't think I'd land on Hayes or Vanderbilt. Maybe if they're going to see mid-20s minutes, sure, you can land on them, but still, they're not good offensively, so it's really hard to trust them. Maybe Taurean Prince, but he's just so scoring dependent. So not a lot to like here for the Lakers. The big news, obviously, is LeBron and AD. Thankfully, it's the first game, so we'll get that news before lock, and we'll be able to make adjustments in how we want to attack this game. But with that in mind, obviously huge blowout risk here. In terms of like the price tags for the Celtics, I don't see anyone who really stands out. Now, I will mention, Holiday at 6.3K is an interesting price tag just because he's one of those guys. If it's a close game, he's going to see mid to high 30s minutes, and he's good defensively. He can hit open shots. He can get assists. He can get rebounds. So it's one of those things where 6.3K for him is fine. If he goes out there and gets you mid 30s fantasy points, which he can do with a fully healthy team, I think that's pretty solid. But the rest of the team here, it's just, you're a little bit too reliant on these guys having really good games. I do like the price tag in Porzingis, but he becomes pretty much just a scorer alongside this fully healthy team. Same thing with Brown. It's just hard to really trust these guys at their price tags. Unless you're trying to get really different, I don't think there's a need to really land on any Boston Celtic. And then in terms of the value, really not much value. I mean, Pritchard's probably the best value, but he's not going to see a ton of minutes with a fully healthy team. Maybe Hauser. I mean, he's seen the minutes. You just really need him to hit a few threes. Otherwise, going to screw you, and he's not coming in at a great price tag of 4.1K. Guida, whatever you want to call him. Yeah, he's there. So it's like not a lot to really love here for this first game overall. Moving on to the second game here, the Pacers versus the Knicks. Halpern said he should be good to go. He said he's going to play. So he only played 22 minutes in that first game against Boston. Shot it 16 times, which is encouraging. Still went for a double-double. I would assume, they said for a while he's going to be on a minutes limit. I would assume it's going to be around 25 minutes once again. At that price that you just can't do it. Even if you're trying to be risky, I just don't think there's a need to do it. 25 minutes, super limited for a guy like him. As you can see, he can still go for double-double, but I don't think the risk is worth the reward. With him back, it should open up the floor for Siakam, but obviously it should hurt his playmaking upside. So I think he's fine at 8.4K. Doesn't really stand out to me. I think Turner's probably the best play. If he stays out of foul trouble, he should see 30-plus minutes, and we know he is really, really solid and high ceiling if he hits threes and if he gets a few blocks. So right now, I do think Turner is probably the best option on this side here. Nembhard with Halpern back should see mid-20s minutes. He's okay. You know, Naismith absolutely popped off. He's been seeing a ton of minutes recently, as you can see, 34, 37, 41. And he's been playing really, really well. I don't know if we can trust this playmaking. 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 7 and 6, and then 12 and 7, especially with Halpern back. But if you want to ride the hot streak, he's not coming in at a terrible price tag, and he's seen a ton of minutes. Decent shooter. I don't mind it at 5.4K. Hield is the pivot play off of what will probably be somewhat chalky Naismith. Hield is obviously the pivot play. If you want to get off the heavy ownership for Naismith, Hield, came and talk, is your good go-to option. And then obviously, if there's Mathurin, if he is back, that's obviously played into the fact of Naismith seeing a ton of minutes, just Mathurin being questionable and out. But if he is back here for this game, definitely going to eat into a little bit of Naismith's minutes. And I think even okay GPP dart throw off the bench. In terms of the rest of the team, not a ton of interest. They'll run a decent amount of these guys off the bench here. But there's really no need with all these injuries and kind of a fully healthy team now to really get to any of these guys. Moving on to the Knicks here. Obviously, Brunson looks like a fantastic and safe spin up. I mean, he's going to do a ton. He's going to shoot the ball 20-plus times. Really, really like him as a spin up. DiVincenzo's been great filling in. As you can see, the past 2 games been going off. He's a really good three-point shooter. 15 3-point attempts the past 2 games. Don't expect that to happen. But if he's going to keep hitting them, he's going to keep shooting them, and they're going to need his offense. So I do think he's a pretty solid play there at 6.8. If OG is back, I actually do like OG. He should be way more aggressive offensively with there being no Randall. You would hope. There's still that risk that he still is the third option behind DiVincenzo and Brunson, but I do really like him if he's good to go to play in this game here against Indiana. Obviously, it's a fantastic game environment. We always want to target Indiana. So it's nice to get to at least 1 or 2 pieces from this New York Knicks side. Obviously, Brunson's the best, but in terms of the secondary options, I do think I'd probably prefer OG to DiVincenzo if you're trying to get different in terms of the ownership percentage. But if you're going with the best play, second best behind Brunson, it's going to be DiVincenzo. Hartenstein, he should still be playing, high 20s, possibly into the 30s minutes range. And I think it's a really, really solid play. There should be a ton of shot attempts from Indiana. As you can see, he's a guy who gets a ton of rebounds, can get blocks as well. Really, really solid upside. So I do have interest in Hartenstein. Josh Hart been playing really, really decent, in terms of his overall production compared to what he was seeing before. Obviously, the minutes have skyrocketed, but yeah, went for a triple-double last game. I don't love that price tag for him. I'd rather get to Hartenstein or OG or DiVincenzo, but he's there. You're kind of trying to get different ownership-wise. And then Precious, the same thing. They're playing these guys a ton of minutes just because they don't really have anyone else. Randall's out, OG was out, and then Grimes is questionable. If OG and Grimes are back, sure, the minutes could go down a little bit for a guy like Hart and Precious, but I still think they're fine. That's really it. If you want to get to extreme dart throw, Sims, but not much interest there. And then I'm surprised Miles McBride's not playing more minutes, just with how guard heavy the Knicks have been going. But he could be a potential dart throw. I mean, we've seen games where he's had solid games, 15 fantasy points, 21, 10, 15 in a short amount of time. So I don't mind him, especially if, OG, DiVincenzo, Hart, they're all kind of foul prone-ish guys. If they get in foul trouble or if they're not playing well, Miles is going to be that main guard off the bench there. So I actually don't mind him as a dart throw play for, a tournament setting tomorrow to get different on this 4-game slate. On to Cleveland here versus Memphis. Cleveland's playing tonight, so it's a back-to-back for them. So hopefully that keeps this game close. and potentially there might be a guy that rests, like a guy like Mobley. He might sit out. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But right now, they're all good to go. And with that in mind, as I always say, with these price tags, with them a fully healthy team, it's really just a crapshoot. Like if you wanted to get to someone, Mitchell's going to be your best bet. Still don't love the price tag on Allen there with a fully healthy team. It's just one of those things where, it's Allen or Donovan Mitchell leads the team, and the rest of the guys, sure, they can have solid games, but you don't feel great, especially with these price tags. You need them to drop a little bit more, unless you're trying to get very different on the slates. You can definitely get to one of these guys, and I'd suggest it being Donovan. But otherwise, not a ton of interest here. They're all playing solid minutes tonight. Garland on a little bit of a minutes restriction, but nothing too crazy there. But yeah, no one really in terms of their price tag stands out to me. Then you get like the secondary options like Strus and Levert. It's just not a lot to like here for the Cleveland side. They're just all priced about right, and the prices haven't come down since those guys have returned, like Mobley and Garland. So not much interest for me in that team right now. Moving on to Memphis, but yeah, I think that's a sentiment across the board for most people. So they could provide you a way to get different on the slate, kind of just like the Miles McBride dart throw play. If you want to get different, Cleveland would be your option. Would probably be the strongest option if you're looking for a whole team to get different with. On to Memphis here. Obviously, this game stays close. It's going to be because of Jaren Jackson Jr. So I think he's a pretty strong play there. Vince, excuse me. I don't know why he's calling Venus. Vince is, I think, a pretty strong play as well. 6.4K. He's going to see a ton of minutes. And he's been super, super efficient. More of like a defensive guy, but he's really stepped up offensively in terms of the rebounds, the assists, even scoring. So I do like him. Him and Triple J look really, really solid. With Luke Kennard's back, which it looks like he's not going to be, don't have to worry about that. Santi did get the start the last game. If he starts or even if he comes off the bench, I still think he's a decent play, 5.6. He should be aggressive. They'll need his offense, decent shooter. I think Xavier Tillman's a sneaky play here. Not a lot of people went to him in the last slate, played 37 minutes, and we've seen him have huge games. He can go for 40, 50 plus if he's having a pretty solid game. Not out there offensively, but he's one of those guys that can stuff the stat sheet. As you can see here, at the beginning of the season, went for 48 there with a double-double. So he can be aggressive, so I don't mind him there at 5.3K. He's pretty interesting play. In terms of the rest of the team, Roddy, we'll see minutes. I think he's a fine, played 5.1. Same thing with like GG and Conchar. Like they'll see the minutes, but nothing too crazy there. The offense is still going to flow through Triple J, Vince, even Santi. Sure, one of these guys could have a pretty solid game, but not a ton of interest. And then whoever starts at point guard for me is probably the most interesting play besides kind of the main two guys, whether that's Scottie Pippen Jr. or whether it doesn't look like it's going to be Gilliard, so it looks like it might be Scottie Pippen Jr. If he starts again, I do have a lot of interest there at 4.7. Saw a decent amount of minutes that last game. And then Matt Hurt, they signed him in a 10-day. He did play 23 minutes, so if you're looking for some cheap value, you can take a shot at him if he's good to go. And if you're a guy like Contra or Luke or D-Rose are out, definitely helps with those scrubs minutes. Moving on to Philadelphia here versus Utah. Obviously, the last game, Embiid probably going to be out. Maxey, the big news here is if he's going to play or not. I would assume he's going to play, and if he does, really, really love him in this matchup. Going to absolutely lead this team offensively, and we've seen the games before with no Embiid. Maxey does go off and shoot the ball a ton. And the secondary options like Kelly Oubre, Tobias, they both look really, really good in terms of this matchup, in terms of their price tags, in terms of their upside with their usage that they should have with no Embiid. So those three main guys are really, really strong plays for tomorrow. They're all going to be popular, but for good reason. They should all carry the load offensively with no Embiid. Now, Reed is interesting because he was terrible. Let's just say it. He was terrible in his spot starts for Embiid this season. Not a ton of like blow up games, which a lot of people thought he was going to have because he was usually a pretty good point per minute guy heading into the season, and he kind of fell off in terms of like starting for Embiid and being out there. He's foul prone, but it's kind of been the sentiment around him, and I don't mind getting into him at 6,000 because we saw he's kind of turned on a little bit recently. He went for 54 against Jokic, which is crazy. But yeah, I have interest in him there. In terms of the secondary options, Batum, Beverly, Mo Bamba should see a little bit of action there. They're fine. Nothing too crazy there. I think Morris would probably be the most interesting in terms of like the secondary cheaper options for the Philly side, but really just kind of going to stick with the main three guys for me. Then moving on to Utah here. I think Laurie comes in as a pretty solid contrarian option. Sexton, same thing, 6.6K. Minutes have been down a little bit the past two games, but before that we saw him go on a massive stretch. A really, really good game. So once again, I do have interest in him. Clarkson's kind of your GPP play off the bench there. Just hope he gets hot. Otherwise, he's going to screw you. Kessler's pretty cheap. Minutes have not been great, but he's still been pretty solid and productive just because he's really good at getting blocks. So another cheap center option you can go to. Fonte's been starting. Does seem a little bit too cheap there at 4.2K for a guy who's pretty score independent, but he's been decently productive in terms of him being in the starting lineup and paying off his price tag. Kelly O should see anywhere from like 15 to 20 minutes. Don't mind him. Could be a sneaky GPP dart throw play if you think a guy like Markkinen or possibly a guy like even John Collins gets voucherable. You could definitely go to Kelly O. But yeah, Collins is there. Nothing too crazy here for the Utah side. So right now that is the early look breakdown for the slates. Obviously, a good amount of news we do have to wait for in terms of LeBron and AD, which kind of changes the whole slate. But right now, really, really liking Maxey. I mean, if he's good to go, love him. Tobias Harris, Kelly Oubre, and then I do really like Xavier Tillman. It's kind of a pivot play. DiVincenzo, obviously, that makes sense to go to one of those guys on the New York Knicks side, whether it's him, whether it's OG, and I think Miles Turner's a sneaky play. So a lot of decent GPP dart throw plays for tomorrow. So obviously, a ton of news we do it to wait for. So all of my updated core plays on my Patreon, link down below, about 15, 10, maybe in 5 minutes before the slate breakdown. And then, yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.